You're listening to Fletcher C. Johnson. I'm Fletcher C. Johnson. I now present 8 short stories about bicycles. Story 1. Bum Bike. I bought a stolen bicycle off a homeless man for $10. I was living in Portland, Oregon at the time. On this day, I had walked for almost 2 hours to get from my home in Northeast Portland to a pharmacy downtown. I was having a prescription for my hair loss pills transferred from the East Coast. What I didn't take into account was the time difference between the East and the West. When I arrived downtown, my East Coast pharmacy was already closed. I was going to have to walk 2 hours home, then 2 hours back the next day. But just outside of the pharmacy, a homeless man offered me a bicycle for $15. This was some rusty mountain bike on its last leg. I talked him down to $10. I knew the bicycle was stolen. It had a lock attached to the frame, and the homeless man didn't know the combination. Still, I gave him $10 and made it home in about 20 minutes. I went through every number on this lock and none of them work, I complained to my roommate Danny. The lock was an unimpressive piece of chain wrapped around the crossbar. The combination portion was permanently inserted between 2 of the chain links. It featured 3 rotating number sets of 10, 1,000 possible combinations altogether. I sat on our back porch and tried 000 through 999 with no luck. I was broke, and I knew that if I could just figure out this lock's combination, it would save me from having to buy my own. Danny could tell I was frustrated when I grabbed the bike with one hand and shook the lock with the other, banging it against the crossbar. "That's what you get for buying a stolen bicycle," Danny told me. "You don't think I feel bad about this?" I asked. "I don't think you do, or you wouldn't have bought it." I went through all the number combinations again, but had no luck. "Must be rusted inside," I said. "I'll go get some WD-40. Later that night, Danny and I rode to Chinatown to dance at a gay and lesbian club. We were both straight, but they had 75-cent drinks on Wednesdays, and the music was really good. "Can I lock my bike up with yours?" I asked Danny. I never managed to get that combination right. "I'm not locking up your stolen bicycle," Danny said. "What if the bike's owner's in the bar? You want them slashing my tires when they see their stolen shit out here?" Danny got even angrier. "I mean, you don't know. That could be one of our friends' bikes. Are you going to tell him you just—" "It's fine," I said, cutting Danny off. I got back on my bike and rode 3 blocks to a nearby park. I stashed the bicycle deep in some bushes and walked back to the club. When I arrived, Danny was holding a 75-cent tequila orange juice. He looked at me and said, "That's what you get for buying a stolen bicycle." We left the bar a couple of hours later, and my bike was still in the bushes. The broken lock clanked against my seat tube as we rode home. Danny and I lived in a house with a fenced-in side yard. Our fence was made out of wide slabs of wood that touched each other and rose 8 feet in the air. You could maybe see through the slabs if you pressed your face against the wood in a couple of places, but it was pretty well hidden. We never bothered to lock the fence's gate. I arrived home, drunk, put my bike in the side yard, and passed out on our couch. When I woke, my roommate Michelle was cooking breakfast and listening to the song "Ain't No Sunshine" by Bill Withers. I was still half asleep, but I knew the song had been on repeat. The tune had entered my dreams. It was already after 10 a.m., so I decided to ride down to the soup kitchen and get some food. I was taking most of my meals there at the time. I got off the couch, already fully dressed, and walked to the side yard. In it, I saw our fire pit, a neat stack of paint gallons, many piles of uncollected dog shit, and 2 of my roommate's bicycles. But my bum bike was gone. I rushed into the kitchen and asked Michelle, "Do you know if anyone borrowed my bike?" "Shit," she said with a smirk. "Is it gone? That's hilarious. Your stolen bicycle got stolen?" "Maybe Danny took it to work," I said. "Danny's here." "Danny!" yelled Michelle. "Fletcher's stolen bicycle got stolen." Danny came out of his room. "What?" he asked. "No way," I cut in. "Everyone else's bike is still out there. Why would they just take my crappy one?" "It's like that homeless guy had some kind of tracking device on it," said Michelle. "But he sold it to me downtown." "No, he tracked it. Maybe it was in the lock. I bet he's sold that bike over 20 times. "Stupid," I said. "Maybe someone's playing a trick on me." Danny walked over and got some water out of the refrigerator. He took a sip, looked at me, and said, "That's what you get for buying a stolen bicycle." Story 2. Love. I went on a 2-week road trip with a couple of friends, and on the day we left, one of the guys came down with a terrible cold. Still, we all climbed into a cramped car and prepared for the first stint, which was a 24-hour straight drive from Boston to Mobile, Alabama. Strangely, when the sick friend got in the car, he was wearing a suit. "Why are you wearing a suit?" I asked. "Put on something comfortable. We're driving for like a whole day." He looked at me, pulled some tissues from his jacket pocket, and said, "Hey, if you're looking good, you're feeling good. Can't feel sick in a suit." And this logic made sense to me. A year later, I had just been dumped by a woman who I was obsessed with, so I was wearing a suit. Looking good, feeling good. Can't feel sad in a suit. Unfortunately, this simple logic wasn't working. Maybe dumped is too strong a word. The girl's name was Chelsea. I had known her for about a year. We met at a party at her house, and from the first moment she crossed my vision, I had always had a crush on her. But, unfortunately, she had always had a boyfriend. That is, until a few weeks ago. When we started seeing each other, I couldn't believe my luck. Chelsea was beautiful and confident, social but book smart. She seemed like everything I ever wanted. But, after a couple of weeks, she said we couldn't go on. "I just got out of a long relationship. I don't want to jump into another one," she explained. "I want to date. I want to sleep around. I want to be free." And I couldn't argue with this desire, because my attitude had always been similar. Similar, that is, until I met Chelsea. So, the day Chelsea broke the news, I put on my suit. My friends got me drunk on cheap vodka, and then we rode our bicycles to the only indie club night in Boston. Each week, people in their early 20s, who had come up in the punk or hardcore or goth or metal scene, met up on a Saturday night and tried to learn how to flirt. We drank and danced to obscure music and whispered secrets to our friends, privately hoping those secrets somehow made it back to the people who we desired. Our scene was small, so, of course, soon enough, Chelsea appeared on the dance floor. She had short bleach blonde hair, and she was an incredible dancer. I tried to brush it off. After all, Chelsea had never been my girlfriend. But the problem was, I wanted her to be my girlfriend. And even more devastating, for a moment there, it looked like this might actually happen. Chelsea ended it with me by saying she was going to start seeing a boy named Davey. Davey was in our crowd, but I didn't know him well. He was wilder than me, popular, and maybe worst of all, I had never heard anyone say a bad word about him in my life. Now I leaned against the bar in my suit, watching Davy and Chelsea shimmy on the dance floor. "Hey, Fletcher," said Chelsea, passing me 40 minutes later. The dance floor was 4 steps below the bar area, and we found each other on those stairs. "You know Davy," she said, pointing to the man behind her. The music was loud, so Davy shouted, "Hey, Fletcher, how's it going?" He extended his hand and looked me up and down. "You're looking great in that suit," he continued. On the staircase, I stood 1 step above Davy, which, unfortunately, only made me slightly taller than he was. Still, I put my hand on Davy's shoulder, leaned my mouth close to his ear, and confidently said, "Hey, man, I know everyone says you're a really nice guy, and I'm sure we'd get along or whatever, but I don't want to be your friend." Davy leaned back and looked at me. He nodded his head slightly and said, "Okay then, I understand." He then put his hand on Chelsea's back and moved the 2 of them away from me. Soon I was on the sidewalk unlocking my bicycle. The club was on Lansdowne Street, which is the armpit of Boston. The only things on Lansdowne are nightclubs and Fenway Park. In both cases, by the end of the night, you're going to be surrounded by a bunch of townies who are looking to punch each other. I was drunk, but not that drunk. I pedaled against traffic on Lansdowne, took a right on Brookline Ave, and passed over the Mass Pike. I descended into Kenmore Square, letting my bike pick up speed, allowing my tie to blow in the wind. I passed 7-Eleven, cruising at a good clip, leaving my problems behind. That's when a drunk girl darted into the street. She blasted into my side, causing me to swerve directly into the taxicab that she was trying to hail. The cab was traveling in the same direction that I was, and luckily I didn't go over the hood. Instead, I was graced by the cab's side, and the car's right mirror hit me from behind. My legs got hung up in my handlebars as my body went over the top of my bike, and soon my face was making contact with the concrete. I skidded to a stop, losing a bunch of skin on my cheek, and splitting my lip open in such a way that later required stitches. The cab continued on its way. "Oh my God!" the girl screamed a number of times. "Oh my God, are you okay?" My bike was still in the road, but somehow my body had ended up pretty close to the sidewalk. "I'm so sorry," the girl continued. "Are you okay? I'm so sorry. That was my fault. I'm drunk. Oh my God." I sat up and touched my face. There was quite a bit of blood. A random passerby darted into the street and retrieved my bicycle. "Are you okay?" the girl went on, squatting down next to me. I lifted my arms and legs to see if anything was broken, but everything moved. I looked at my cheap suit, and it didn't appear damaged at all. The drunk girl reached out and gently ran her hand along my arm. She looked like a sorority girl in heels and a white tube dress, honestly the type of person I usually avoided, but her concerns seemed genuine, and I didn't wish her ill will. "Are you okay?" she asked for a 4th time, and I could see that she was distressed. Her body was shaking. I sat in the gutter looking at the girl. I thought for a moment and finally said, pathetically, "I got dumped, so this is only the 2nd worst thing that happened to me today." "Oh my God," she screamed. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "It's okay," I said, but she kept apologizing. I stood up and brushed myself off. The drunk girl touched my arm again and asked what she could do, but I couldn't think of anything, so I didn't say a word. "Okay," she said, her body relaxing a bit. "Okay. I'm having a party at my house next weekend. You should come. You have to come." She took a pen and scrap of paper out of her handbag and wrote down her number. "The party," she said, "it's gonna be really good. It's gonna be really good." I nodded and put the piece of paper in my pocket. The girl watched me pick my bike off the sidewalk and lock it to a street sign. Then, without saying a word, I started walking towards Mass General Hospital. You might be wondering if I called the number, and the answer is yes. You might ask yourself what the girl's intentions were. Was she being polite? Was she afraid I would sue her? Did she have a thing for boys in suits? But we'll never know the answer to these questions because she never picked up. I left a couple of messages but didn't get a reply. This was before I had a cell phone, before text messages. After the accident, I was in worse shape than before. Beat up and stitched up and heartbroken. I lay in my bed and thought about the girl who had knocked me into the cab. Of course, this isn't true, but at that time, in that mental state, it all seemed obvious to me. This was just another woman who wanted to hang out with me one moment, and then, later, decided she actually didn't want me around at all. Story 3. Dad's Bike. "I want to build you a new bike," Lily said. Lily, my girlfriend, had been a bike messenger in San Francisco, where the hills are ridiculous and the couriers pride themselves on being insane, although the latter part can be said about bike messengers almost anywhere. "It won't squeak when you pedal," Lily went on, and you have to have brakes." "I don't know," I said. I looked at her accusingly. "I'm not bringing it inside at night." "If it's raining, you have to bring it in. That's why the brakes in your bike are seized." "No one steals a bike with no brakes," I said. Lily looked at me for a moment like I was crazy, and then she said, "No one could possibly know if the brakes in your bike work until after they've already stolen it. You have to ride the bike to see if the brakes work." I sat staring at Lily from the kitchen of her loft in Brooklyn. There was a table between us, constructed out of plywood and 2x4s, that defined where the kitchen ended and the living room began. "You know how I feel about new bikes," I said. "It's not going to be brand new. It's just going to work. It'll be new to you." I shook my head. Lily stood in a space that wasn't quite the living room or the kitchen. Maybe it could be thought of as a hallway between the two, but it was over 20 feet wide and covered in random moped parts. It looked more like a junkyard than anything else. One of Lily's many roommates worked on mopeds, and these scraps belonged to him, although there were a number of stray bicycle pieces mixed in as well. I was sure Lily could easily build me a working bicycle if she wanted. I thought for a moment, then said, "You are just embarrassed to ride next to me when I'm on my squeaky bicycle." Lily got right into it. "Fuck you," she said. "I can't believe you said that. What an asshole thing to say. You know I don't think that." And this was true. I didn't believe she was embarrassed by me at all. I said it just to say it. In reality, I didn't want Lily to build me a bicycle because I'd been trying to figure out how to get out of this relationship for over a month. Every week, I planned on breaking up with her, and every week I was too afraid to do it. We had no problems. In fact, this was the closest thing we'd ever had to a fight. But we'd been together for 5 months, through the winter and into the spring, and now I wanted out of the relationship just because I wanted out. Seeing other people sounded fun. But how do you say this to someone you care about? It seemed cruel. inhumane. The only thing I could imagine crueler than blindsiding Lily with a breakup was letting Lily build me a bicycle and then breaking up with her. It was at this point that I decided to just say it out loud, although I knew full well that Lily wouldn't understand that I was being honest. "What do I do with the bike if we break up?" I asked. "You'd keep it," said Lily, without missing a beat. "I don't give a fuck." "Well, I'd feel weird riding the bike if we broke up," I went on. "Do you think about everything like this, all the time?" Lily asked. Instead of answering, I stepped out of the kitchen and joined her in the junkyard. I leaned down and picked up a stray pair of handlebars. "My dad gave me a brand new bicycle when I lived in Boston," I said. "He got it from Walmart for $15. It was my junior year of college. This bike, it was like a beach cruiser body with road bike wheels and mountain bike gears all Frankenstein together. My dad was so proud because he'd found it for, like next to nothing. It seemed like a big score to him. He was so excited to give it to me. Then, after 2 days, guess what? It got stolen." Lily stared at the ground. I could tell she wasn't listening. I placed the handlebars on top of a broken table saw, looked around, and said, "I think all these bike frames are too big for me." "Who cares?" said Lily. "You don't want me to make you one anyway." "I don't," I agreed. And with that, Lily marched into her bedroom and shut the door behind her. I walked into the living room and sat on a worn futon. I wondered how long a person could stay in a relationship solely not to hurt another person's feelings. Then I thought about watching television, but there were a couple of Lily's roommates that I didn't wish to see, and they could come home at any moment. In fact, at Lily's loft, the two of us rarely left her bedroom. Eventually, I got up and opened Lily's door, but I didn't see her inside. It was just an empty desk and some dressers. Lily's bed sat on a platform, raised 7 feet above this furniture. I climbed a ladder, passed through a small hatch, and found Lily on her bed leaning against a couple of pillows with her computer in her lap. "Hey," I whispered, still standing on the ladder. Lily didn't respond. "Man," I went on, "that bike, that Walmart bike, it was purple. It was like the ugliest thing you've ever seen." I crawled up and placed my body on the bed. I was still wearing my shoes, so I let them dangle off the end. Rode okay for a beach cruiser, but it was just embarrassing. Lily looked at her computer, and I looked at Lily. "Never told my dad," I said, "but honestly, I was so happy when that bike got stolen." Story 4. Brakes. My friend asked me, "Why don't you have any brakes on your bike?" "Why doesn't anyone have anything?" I replied. "A combination of laziness and misfortune." Story 5. Bike Thief. Scandalous Eric and I had been crashing at our friend Anderson's apartment on and off for a couple of months. This was Boston, 2003. Unfortunately, Anderson had a roommate named Adam Ohio who hated us and wanted us gone. In fact, Adam had banned us from returning to the apartment on 2 separate occasions, but Anderson didn't respect Adam, and Eric was more physically intimidating than Adam, so we just kept coming back, and there was nothing Adam could do about it. One afternoon, Eric and I were sitting on Anderson's couch watching TV when Adam Ohio walked through the front door, followed by a friend. Adam took one look at us and made a beeline for his bedroom. "Adam!" yelled Scandalous. "You have a friend? Never seen you with a friend before." Eric was off the couch, following Adam down the hall. "Come back," Eric said. Adam reluctantly turned around. "Hey, Eric," he said. "This is my friend Artemis. He's visiting from Philly." "We didn't think Adam had friends," Eric said to Artemis. "We thought he was a loser. Why do you have those bolt cutters?" Artemis was scrawny, skinnier than me. He wore a Phillies baseball cap slightly turned to one side, an expensive windbreaker, a backpack with too many zippers, and he held a large pair of bolt cutters in his hand. "All these rich kids in Boston," said Artemis, brandishing the bolt cutters. "I'm gonna steal a track bike and bring it back to Philly." To this, Scandalous Eric did a rare thing. He was silent. Eric looked at Adam, then Artemis, then Adam again. Eventually, Adam said, "Artemis is sleeping on the couch tonight, so you guys gotta find somewhere else to crash." "This isn't your living room," said Eric. "What are you talking about?" Adam replied. "Other people live in this house," Eric said. "You think you own the whole house?" This disagreement went on for a while. It continued as Adam changed his shoes. It went on as Artemis dumped his stuff next to the couch. And it didn't stop until Adam and Artemis exited the apartment to get some lunch. "Fuck that guy," said Eric after the front door had shut. "I know everyone in Boston with a track bike, and that asshole isn't getting one." And this was somewhat true. Eric had worked as a bike messenger, and he certainly knew people who rode nice bikes. "And I know a lot of people in Philly," Eric went on. "Who is this fucking loser? Friends with Adam? That sucks." Eric sat back on the couch, picked up Artemis's bag, and unzipped one of the many zippers. He put his hand inside. "I like this bag, actually," Eric said. "What is this?" He leaned the bag back, giving it a glance, then continued going through it. Eventually, he removed 2 large pill bottles. "Painkillers and muscle relaxers," Eric said, holding them to his face. "Is he up here trying to sell these?" Eric put the bottles on the coffee table, gave the bag one more look, then returned it to the floor. He concluded by saying, "I'm not letting some drug dealer from Philly steal one of my friend's bikes." Eric then grabbed the pill bottles and bolt cutters and walked them to the kitchen. He placed them high on a shelf in the pantry, then returned to the living room, and again joined me on the couch. "Shut the fuck up," yelled Eric. "I didn't take your shit." After returning from lunch, Artemis had cornered Eric in the kitchen. "I left them in the living room," said Artemis. "Then they're still in the living room," said Eric. "I don't know." Artemis seemed a bit drunk. I guess there'd been beers with lunch. He leaned his body toward Eric, and Eric leaned right back. "Eric," pleaded Adam from the far side of the room. "Give him back his bolt cutters." I guess no one had noticed the pill bottles. "I don't have them," said Eric. "I know you have them," said Adam. Eric pushed Artemis out of his way. He walked straight toward Adam and said, "I've never, in my life, met anyone who knows less than you." Later that night, Eric and I wandered around Jamaica Plains. We passed by the projects, just walking and talking. I didn't know where we were going to sleep that night, and I didn't care. I felt good. "I used to hook up with a girl who lived right around the corner from here," Eric said. "She broke her neck stage diving when she was young, and then everyone hated her because no one was allowed to do all ages shows after that." "I kind of remember that," I said, nodding my head. "She's fine now," Eric pointed out. "She's, like, normal." We passed an empty baseball diamond. The streets were foggy. The sky wanted to rain, but couldn't quite do it. Those bolt cutters are worth at least $100, Eric said. I'm going back to get them later. What are you going to do with them? I asked, meaning where was he going to store them? Neither of us had a home. You could cut through a parking meter with those things, Eric said. The streets were mostly empty, but we turned a corner and found two people walking our way. We nodded at them, and they nodded back. My stomach hurts, I said after the people passed. I took 2 of those painkillers. I should have eaten something. You're on painkillers right now? Eric laughed. He didn't use drugs, but he appreciated someone who could function while high. I felt really good for a while, I said, but now my stomach it feels like it's going to explode. Eric turned away from me and said, maybe I'll head to BU. You know where everyone leaves their bike outside on that big rack? Lots of good bikes there. I paused at the next corner and doubled over in pain. Eric stopped. He leaned against a big blue mailbox and looked at me indifferently. I'm gonna try to throw up in these bushes, I said. I bent over and heaved. I pushed and pushed, but my body wouldn't release. I looked at Eric and he was bored. He didn't have time for people on drugs. Eventually, I stuck my finger down my throat, but in spite of my best efforts, I couldn't get anything out. Story 6. Gloves. Why are you wearing socks on your hands? My friend asked. They're gloves, I said, because my hands get cold when I bike. Those aren't gloves. They're socks. Where's the thumbs? I looked at my friend, then looked at my hands. I nodded shyly and said, well, they're wool socks. Story 7. 2 doors. The first time I got car doored, I was too drunk to understand that it wasn't my fault. I was bicycling down Essex Street, getting ready to take a left on Delancey and start climbing the Williamsburg Bridge. I was pedaling beside a line of cars that were waiting at a red light. It was a cab, maybe 5 cars back, that opened its door right into me. Just some passengers trying to get out at a place where they shouldn't have, not looking behind them. The door grazed my handlebars. It wasn't a full hit, but it set me off balance. Still, in spite of my drunkenness, I was able to catch myself by putting a foot down. I never fell over. Sorry, I shouted back, trying to get the bike moving again. I hadn't seen them open the door. I thought that I had drunkenly ricocheted off their rear bumper. I worried that I'd scratched their car and this would cost me money that I didn't have. Years earlier, I was sleeping in a car in Missoula, Montana, when a drunk cyclist plowed into the back. It was the middle of the night. I thought someone was trying to break in, but then I saw the cyclist pop up, gather his bike, and begin riding away. He was wasted. He swerved wildly as he continued down the road. The next day, I found his glasses in the street. This time around, I felt a similar type of confusion. I looked back, saw people getting out of the car, and assumed they were coming after me because I'd crashed into them. But then they started apologizing, furiously, and suddenly I understood that this wasn't my fault. I heard the cab driver accusing the passengers of damaging his door. But, again, I was drunk, so I didn't want any part of this. I rode on, barely noticing that my handlebars were no longer lined up with the front tire. This wasn't a problem. I had ridden with crooked handlebars before. The second time I got car doored, I knew exactly what happened. I was riding down Bedford in Williamsburg, broad daylight, and it was again some passengers getting out of a cab. In fact, I had studied the cab as I approached it and thought, why is that cab parked in the middle of the street? Then the cab's door opened and again hit me in the handlebars. This time I wasn't so lucky. I was completely thrown off balance and ended up lying in the gutter, my bicycle on top of me. The door actually hit me in my middle finger as my hand gripped the handlebars, and the door's edge got under my skin and peeled it back. Now, there was more than an inch of skin on my finger, still partly attached, but flapping in the wind. I was furious. I didn't have health insurance. Someone was going to pay for whatever it took to fix this. And then, two older, flamboyant, gay men got out of the back of the cab, and they were hysterical. "Oh no!" they screamed. "We killed him! We killed this man!" And soon they were also lying in the street, holding me. They cradled me in their arms while my legs were still tangled in my bicycle. They begged me not to be hurt, and then one of them began to cry. "Wait!" the crying man yelled at the cab. "We're taking him to the emergency room." But then I did the thing I always do when someone is more concerned about myself than I am. I tried to comfort them. "It's fine," I said. "I'm barely hurt." I covered my injured finger with my other hand. "You have to go to the emergency room," they said. "What if you have a concussion? Where's your helmet?" And then I took my comforting nature even further. I told them that it was my fault and that I should have been wearing a helmet. And in fact, I get hit by car doors all the time. I apologized as I removed the men's hands from my body, stood up, and pulled my bicycle out of the road. I righted my bike and waved at the men as I started walking down the sidewalk. "Where are you going?" they asked as I limped away. I looked back and again assured them that I was fine. The two men stood beside the cab as tears rolled down one of their cheeks. They held each other and watched me go. Story 8. Butter Dish. I woke in my dorm room, naked and bleeding. I was lying on my bed on top of the blankets. The air conditioning in the dorm rooms was particularly strong, and I was cold. I shared the room with an English major named Ben. When I came to, I found Ben sitting on his bed looking at me. "Are you okay?" he asked. Soon I was in the common room, still naked, standing on our couch. Ben and I shared a suite with two other roommates, Dominic and Seth. I asked them to join me as we all tried to make sense out of what we were seeing. "We know that I am cut up pretty badly on my left side," I said, pointing at my body. "We know that I'm still drunk, or I would have a terrible hangover right now, which I guess should be coming soon. We do not know how my date went." "Whose bike is behind the couch?" asked Dominic. "He doesn't know that either," said Ben. The couch I stood on usually sat against the wall, but sometime in the night it had been scooted into the middle of the room, and now an unfamiliar bicycle lay on the floor behind it. "I don't know where my bicycle is," I said, "and I don't know whose bike is back there, and I don't know how my date went." "Well, you put that bicycle back there," said Dominic, "because we didn't do it." "I probably did," I agreed. "But I also don't know what happened to all my clothing or the backpack I had with me last night." Seth had gone to the bathroom, and he returned with something in his hands. "Hey," he said, "I found your contact lenses." Seth held up the plastic butter dish that usually sat in the refrigerator of our suite. He opened the lid to reveal two contact lenses floating in the tray. The night before started with me drinking on that same couch. Drinking pretty heavily because I was nervous about my date. When I say the word date, I mean it only in the most contemporary sense. I had made plans to meet a girl named Victoria at a party, and I was looking forward to meeting her there very much. So I showed up drunk. It was her friends, her party. I didn't know anyone. In fact, I hardly knew Victoria. I remember biking to the address she gave me. I remember knocking on the door. A stranger let me in, and everyone turned their heads because it was an intimate party, less than 20 people. I spotted Victoria on a couch and walked to her side. She moved over so I could sit and handed me a joint. And then I woke up in my bed. "You must have crashed that bike," said Ben, looking over the couch. "The handlebars are all bent." "Yeah, Ben, I think that's pretty clear," I said. "I don't know," said Dominic. "They could have bent when you threw it over the couch." And this was true. With our dorm set up, there was no way of getting a bicycle behind the couch without going over the top. Dominic went on. "You must have been trying to hide the bike after you stole it." I looked at Dominic and stepped down from the couch. "We don't know I stole that bike," I said. "I mean, I don't know. I might have traded someone my bike for that one." "Put some clothes on," said Dominic, turning and walking toward the kitchen. "But why are your contact lenses in the butter dish?" asked Seth. He pointed at the butter dish, which now rested on our coffee table. "Actually," I said, following Dominic, "I might have traded my bike and all my clothing for that thing, and my backpack. I was clearly fucking naked when I was riding home. Look at this road rash." I ran my hand gently up my side. It was rough, already scabbing over. Dominic faced me and asked, "How would you have traded your clothes and a backpack for a bicycle? In what situation? You clearly stole it." "I would never steal a bike," I said, but Dominic walked away, ignoring me. The first time I saw Victoria was on a fall day my sophomore year of college. Our school sat on both sides of the Boston Common, and students regularly crossed this park to get from one class to another. On this day, I noticed Victoria walking just in front of me. She was small, with short black hair and an army backpack slung over her shoulder. She wore a black tank top, although it was a bit chilly, and carried a brown leather jacket in her arms. I followed her across the entire park, walking about 20 feet behind her, slowing down and speeding up to match her pace. She wasn't in a rush. She looked around as she walked, taking in the duck pond and the baseball diamond and the fountains. As she observed these things, she turned her head to the left and right, and, for a moment, I'd get a glimpse at her beautiful face. "Do you remember me coming in?" I asked Ben. "You were already passed out when I got home," he said. "What time was that?" 1 a.m., maybe? "That's good," I said. "How much trouble can I get in before 1 a.m.? Dominic appeared again. "Well, maybe you got kicked out of that party and that's why you were home early." "For what?" I asked. "Well, for being naked," said Ben. "Or stealing that bike," said Dominic. "I wouldn't steal a bike," I yelled. "You did steal a bike," he replied. Dominic wedged his way behind the couch and pointed at the wall. "What about this?" he said. "You scraped up the wall. The school's probably going to charge us for that. Are you going to pay for it?" "Where are you?" I started saying, then changed to, "You're just making all of this up in your head. I mean, where are you even inventing this stuff from?" Dominic leaned over the couch and said, "Because I don't want to get kicked out of school." "You're not," I yelled. And then we were interrupted by a knock on the door. The four of us froze. We were silent as Ben looked through the peephole. "It's the girls," he said, opening the door. "I'm going to my room," Dominic shouted and stormed away. Next door to us, 3 girls lived in a triple, and over the school year we'd become pretty close. Sometimes they'd hang in our common room, but mostly we just followed each other down to the cafeteria, gossiping about relationships and worrying about the choices we had made up to this point in our lives. "Why are you shouting and naked?" the girls asked. "Because I'm drunk," I said. "Well," they continued, "how was your date?" The girls knew all about Victoria, how beautiful I thought she was, how we planned to meet up. In fact, they had shared in my nervousness the day before, drinking with me as I prepared to go to the party. I walked into my room and put on underwear. I came out and, with a sigh, said, "I don't know about my date. I woke up with my contact lenses in the butter dish." I didn't meet Victoria until about a month after I trailed her across campus. One night I was sitting with 2 friends on the floor of their dorm room. It was an old, drafty building, pipes that hissed, 150 years worth of paint on the walls. We had left the door to the room open in the friendly way that college kids do. We weren't making much noise, just having a quiet conversation, when Victoria and one of her friends walked into the room. They sat with us, and we looked at each other in stunned silence, because both of these girls were completely naked. "I'm Victoria," said this naked girl. "Who are you?" I didn't answer. "We're freshmen," said her friend. "We're walking around meeting everyone." I looked at Victoria, one of the most beautiful women I had ever seen, and mustered up the courage to say, "I like your hair." "We're on ecstasy," Victoria replied. Back in the common room of my suite, bleeding in just my underwear, I cheered up a bit. I said to the girls, "Actually, when I met Victoria, you guys know, she was naked. So the date might have been okay." "Maybe you got laid," one of the girls said. "That I doubt," I mumbled. I was a virgin at the time. "Well," said the girls, "you should wash your cuts, put on some clothes, and come down to the dining hall with us, because we want to hear this whole story." "And throw out that bike," said Dominic, coming out of his room. "Someone's going to call the cops." "Ugh," I said, putting my hand over my face. "Her phone number was in my notebook, and my notebook was in my backpack, and I lost the stupid backpack last night. What the fuck did I do?" I was suddenly panicking. Seth looked at me from where he now sat on the couch and repeated, "And why are your contact lenses in the butter dish?" "My contact lenses are in the butter dish because my contact case was in my backpack. And my backpack is missing, and her number is missing, and my clothes are missing. And I probably stole that fucking bike." Well, there you have it. 8 stories about bicycles, as promised. That Victoria story continues. The part I told you was not even close to the craziest thing that happened between the 2 of us. But we'll have to save that story for another season of the podcast. If you know anyone who rides a bicycle or anyone who has had their heart broken, please send them this episode of my podcast. I really need help getting the podcast out there, and word of mouth is the best way. If you got a friend that drinks too much, they'll probably love this thing. Let them know about listening to Fletcher C. Johnson. Okay, bonus bicycle story. One summer, I came to New York City to live in my friend's mom's basement. And my dad gave me a ride because he was already picking up my little brother from college. My brother went to Pratt in Brooklyn. Anyway, when we got to Brooklyn, my dad's car started overheating and then it broke down, which happened a lot with this car. I had a big duffel bag with all of my stuff and a bicycle I had brought with me. And after the car broke down, my brother explained to me how I could take the subway to my friend's mom's house. So I heaved the heavy duffel bag on top of my bicycle and rolled it to the subway entrance. The subway, it was down a long flight of stairs, and I didn't want to leave my bag at the top of the stairs while bringing the bike down because I was afraid my bag would get stolen. So I just started rolling the whole thing down the stairs together, and it immediately got away from me. I was holding onto the handlebars, standing next to the bike, and the bike, the bag, and me started increasing speed with each step. First, my feet were running, and then they were just kind of skidding along the top of each stair, and soon I was flying down the stairs, and I was screaming, and people had to jump out of the way until I hit the bottom of the stairs, hauling ass, and I wiped out. Everything skidded across the floor, going everywhere. Complete chaos. Then I had to figure out how to get the bike and the bag back up the stairs when I finally got to my destination. This season of the podcast is 5 episodes long. And if you like what you're hearing, I'm asking people to please Venmo me $5. I spent over 2 years producing this season. Each episode takes multiple months to write and then a month each to produce. And you don't get paid per play with podcasts. People think musicians get a small amount of money from Spotify, but podcasters get literally nothing. So I appreciate the help. My Venmo is at Fletcher C. Johnson, and my PayPal is fletchercjohnson@gmail.com. $5 for this season is appreciated, but a smaller amount is totally acceptable. Anything helps. But for people who support the podcast with $20 or more, I will send them a gift. I will mail them a new book of my writing, a different book than last season. A homemade piece of art for you to keep, something physical to have. Again, my Venmo is at Fletcher C. Johnson. My PayPal is fletchercjohnson@gmail.com. Bonus bicycle story number 2. I went and saw Fugazi on their final tour in 2002. They played 2 nights at Mass Art in Boston. And honestly, I don't even like Fugazi. But it was the biggest event of the year, so I went and I snuck in like I snuck into everything at the time. Sneaking in was half of the fun. Anyway, I was biking over to the show and I got a flat tire, which wasn't that big of a deal in Boston because it's a small city, so I just walked my bike the rest of the way. When I got to the show, there were over 1,000 people hanging outside. It was a total post-punk tailgate situation. Potluck punks as far as the eye could see. Anyway, I was explaining to my friend that I was bummed because I got a flat tire, and then some bike messenger looking dude who I didn't know, I'd never seen before and never saw again, he grabbed my bike out of my hands and said, "I got you." He then proceeded to remove my wheel, pop off the tire, locate the hole in the tube, patch the tube, reassemble my bike, and even pump up my tire with one of those tiny, shitty portable pumps. All of this in under 5 minutes. It was incredible. By the end, people were cheering him on. It was literally the most Fugazi show thing I could possibly imagine happening at a Fugazi show. Next week, we're going to Boston in the late 90s. We're looking at the mainstreamification of punk, the enormous DIY scene that this provoked, the closing of the Rat, the desperate search for all ages venues, and me getting my first girlfriend. Punks and skins will unite. Until then, you've been listening to Fletcher C. Johnson. I'm Fletcher C. Johnson. Thanks for listening.